Now, I promise I don't mean this as a slight, but here in the Ford Mustang convertible, well, I think I can see why these things make such popular rental cars. To the casual observer, the Ford Mustang may seem a sports car. They're noisy, they make a lot of power, but they've never really been a sports car in the traditional sense. No, the Ford Mustang was originally based on just a regular everyday car, the Ford Falcon. It just looked a little sexier, a little spicier, it was a little more fun, a little more spirited. And you know, this here today, the new 7th generation S650, well, it still feels really rather car underneath. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing. As we're going to get into, the Mustang fulfills a very specific brief in a rather effective way. But it does set us off on an interesting footing, because if you've grown up like I have, just seeing these things hooned around Brampton and Mississauga, you may have a certain impression of them. They're noisy, they're obnoxious, and well, I mean, God, this thing's annoying. I feel so rude. But they also are always taking off in a hurry. And you might start to think that, wow, this is a car that you're just going to want to hot shoe all the time. And the reality is that this week, well, no, I haven't at all. In fact, this is one of the laziest drives I think I've had in anything in quite some time. Why does it feel so unhurried? Well, it's not for lack of trying. This here, the GT with the performance pack, is about as loaded as you can get a Mustang. Throw on the convertible as well, and this thing just gets so optioned up. It's some $85,000 as you see it here. Of course. Okay, actually, maybe I take it back. It is kind of fun. As we were saying, because of its general disposition, and honestly owing to one element of its performance pack, this thing is really just easy to cruise around in. These things now come with the option of magnetic ride suspension, and this has it fitted. It's $2.5 grand, and you know, it's actually really rather well spent here, because this thing is a breeze about town, despite riding relatively large 19-inch wheels on stiffer performance rubber. These are Pirelli P0s, which are not great tires, but they're still firm. Well, it should feel a lot harsher around the back roads, over potholes, and especially back home in the city. But then it just isn't. This thing, based on more or less regular underpinnings, is a very straightforward feeling car. It's a different configuration, of course. This 2+2 configuration means that you've got a decent bit of space up here in the front, but those rear seats, well, they're just a gesture, maybe for kids if anything. Yet the overall dimensions feel decidedly sedan. This is a largish car. Though it's got a reasonably short overhang, this thing feels like it just sprawls out around you on either side. If you drop your seat down to a proper low sporty driving position too, it just feels even bigger around you. Now, as a sports car, that is a tremendous detriment. This thing feels like a ham. Well, yes, the modern Mustangs have evolved quite significantly over their rather primitive forebears. It still doesn't feel modern or refined in the way that a peer like the Corvette has come to, or even, honestly, the late Camaros. Instead, it feels just a little bit more A&W, a cruiser to take into town, not to really try to do anything particularly technical in. And yet, if you do want to get technical, there is quite a bit here to answer that. Especially configured with the performance package here, you can have a Torsen limited slip differential out back. You can have really big brakes. This thing with its optional Brembos bumps up to 390 mils of rotor up front, 355 out back. And then, of course, we've got this 6-speed manual in the middle. And what's better is you can actually disable the manual shift assist in this. And it's not just that you can disable auto rev match either. No, this will actually, in something that is really rather rare today, even let you disable the auto hold, auto hill start assist. That is such a welcome relief for those of us who've grown up driving proper manual and feel kind of weird when they put the clutch in and the car doesn't start to roll underneath when they've already braced to compensate for that. That transmission, well, assuming you haven't gone the 10-speed weenie rental car route, You get a 6-speed Getrag down here in the middle. If you go up to the more performance-focused Dark Horse, they actually swap that out for a Tremec, which actually has way shorter ratios, which is awesome. It doesn't get 1-to-1 until 5th gear. Here though, 1-to-1 comes in 4th. And you know, that's all right because it still gives you a good bit of shifting action. This thing making so much noise and so much torque, even down low, and even despite being naturally aspirated, is really fun to shift through the gears. Whereas something like a Porsche will often feel frustrated because you can't run it out to the 7,500 odd RPM redline every time. This, because of its laid-back disposition, feels really rather comfortable. Just a short shift at 2,000 or 3,000, tootle around, have your notchy fun, and call it a day. There's nothing particularly urgent in this. With that then, your response at the pedals is pretty laid back as well. There is a light enough fly setup here that you can blip it with reasonable speed and still feel like you're doing some quick stuff. But it's definitely not a zippy one to pick up or drop in the revs. If I punch the clutch in right here, it takes a minute for it to pick up. Fortunately for heel and toe, the pedal spacing is really advantageous. Your gas pedal and your brake are really quite close, so you can just do a nice tidy roll of the foot. There are no weird gymnastics involved here in bridging that gap. As for the third pedal, well, clutch feel is fine here, but it's modern. It's quite soft, it's unremarkable. You don't really get any sense of anything underfoot, nor do you get the sense of occasion of a firm, stiffly responsive, aggressive spring there in the center of the clutch. That softness, well, unfortunately, it's also the case for the steering here. The steering here in the Mustang, regardless of drive settings and modes, is really rather dull and detached. It feels like a video game wheel. There's no worthwhile feedback here. And well, yes, Ford will try to get you excited by saying that it's got a flat bottom steering wheel, just like race cars. Well, who cares? If anything, flat bottom wheels are just kind of annoying when you're maneuvering in a parking lot. It's a frankly dull input and definitely one of the least satisfying characteristics of this car. Fortunately, other parts of it are a little bit more refined, or at least a little more engaging. Here in the convertible, we've got surprisingly okay wind isolation, for an American car at least. Well, definitely not what you would experience in something like a Lexus that's had really extensive and thoughtful computational fluid dynamics modeling. It still does an okay job. I can run this on the highway with semi-presentable hair later, although to be honest, I ran it here with the roof up just so that I wouldn't make a complete mess of myself before the camera started rolling. Also worth noting there is whether or not you actually plan on using the rear seats, you don't get the option to drop in any sort of baffle that'll help maintain a clean low pressure zone and a quieter, smoother cabin experience. Just driving along at 70 kilometers an hour right now, I feel a gradual buffeting against my arm right now. There's no noise at this speed, but it's definitely not refined. So perhaps they skipped out on a little bit of the computer time modeling the aerodynamics on this, but they didn't when it comes to the infotainment. This here uses a 12.3-inch digital cluster and an even larger central infotainment display. Those screens, well larger than I personally would like, are pretty well executed nowadays. They run a new setup with really slick graphics that incorporate the Unreal Engine that we've started to see used for 3D graphics in a whole bunch of cars. Now, they've gone the gimmick route, as in the Corvette and other things, where they've got these silly little animations that take over your whole display when you switch drive modes. But otherwise, pixel density is good, contrast is good, the blacks are nice, deep, and actually black, and they've finally made it pretty straightforward and indeed almost seamless to switch back and forth between Apple CarPlay and the native infotainment where you need it. Unfortunately, you do still need the native, and indeed probably more than ever, because they have for this generation consolidated ever more functions into the digital environment. You've got no more hard buttons for your HVAC, for instance. All of your climate controls are now done through this central screen. That is really frustrating and unfortunate, as it is the only buttons we've got are down here. They're for the auto start stop, a Mustang button that takes you into a screen where you can choose and adjust your drive modes, traction control, hazards, a customizable favorites button, and of course the required defrost button. From there, it's just a volume knob and your start stop. The rest of it is all in there. On the cluster side, you get some customization to help offset some of that frustration, Of note is that while you can, yes, do a couple different modern styles of gauge display, you can also invoke a couple of throwbacks depending on your preferences. You can run digital gauges that look-ish like the 1960s Mustang cluster, or you can run a Fox body inspired platform, or you can even set it to look like the early aughts SVT Cobra. That's a fun little detail. They're all a little bit cheesy and they feel really two-dimensional, very shallow. Well, yes, it is cute and nice that they chose to offer that. Rendering digitally something that was once properly three-dimensional just inherently feels a little bit off and honestly a little bit disappointing. I wanted to like the Fox body gauges, but driving around this week I just found that they felt weird. As a result, I've now chosen to run it for all driving in the track style display. Not because I want to do some hot boy track stuff, but just because I like the gentle sweep of it, and I like the way that your customizable infotainment and ambient lighting colors are reflected there in the cluster as well. It's also just nice having that lateral movement of the Motec-inspired digital tack, and then of course a nice big gear display down there in the middle, even though you should hypothetically know where your wrist put it last. Are there things that I would wish for in this? Well, definitely for a lower price in this case. You see, the performance pack adds a lot of worthwhile stuff, but honestly, given the character of this car, I don't think that's money that I would be particularly quick to spend. Well, yes, the optional Magna Ride, which comes as an extension of that performance pack, affords a really comfortable ride about town and hypothetically more customizable response when you're really digging into it, even though honestly I haven't really felt all that sharper a difference when I've amped it up. Beyond that, the LSD will keep you from doing one-wheel peels, but otherwise, I mean, this active exhaust is not really necessary. Yes, you get 6 more horsepower, brings it up to 486 from 480, because how could you leave those on the table? But really, it's just kind of obnoxious. This thing is so tremendously loud, and that also comes to one of my other frustrations, is that I wish there was a way to make it a little bit quieter. There is an option for a quieter startup, so it's not giving the full brrr when you fire it up in the morning. But even when you step it back into the quieter mode that has a little mute icon next to it, it's still disruptive. I still feel like an pulling out of my neighborhood in the morning. This thing just feels disrespectful. And if you're looking for that obnoxious hot boy well, yeah, this is probably what you're after, and it does that well. And I've got to be honest, it's fun to set the exhaust to track mode, even though it says on screen right in the middle of the cluster when you do track use only. No one's going to pay attention to that. It makes a thunderous noise, especially when you start to roll past half pedal. It's satisfying, and combined with the tire chirps that you're going to get even as you jump into second, it is a great use of those 418 pound-feet of torque. There is drama to this, and that brings us back to the other part of why it seems a great rental car, because it rides easily. This is a very accessible car to drive. Yeah, there's a lot of power and things can go wrong, especially if you find a crowd of pedestrians nearby. But otherwise, this thing gives you a whole bunch of noise, of theater, and it's something that really impresses passengers. People are excited. They think they're getting into something seriously muscular here. But then you drive it around and it's useful. That duality of character makes this thing really quite enjoyable and versatile in a way that few proper sports cars are. Something like the Toyota Supra will give you more straightforward, more intuitive right pedal steerability. But it's also kind of harsh, and the visibility out of it kind of sucks. In this, well, yeah, the visibility kind of sucks if the roof is up because convertible. But otherwise, this is car. This is car. That is all there is to it. This is car. But you can still get a manual in it, you can disable the assistance, you can run through, and then you can cruise back to clean all of that off over a root beer float. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more sports and enthusiast car news, reviews, previews, specs tests, all the rest, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca.